Hello. What's up? My name is Leslie Roth. I'm a member of the May 30th Alliance. And this is our Rockford reading segment as we try to somewhat get to some kind of what is normal for us, normalcy back here after the assassination attempt that took place last Tuesday outside of the Winnebago County Justice Center that is being swept underneath the rug by the City of Rockford government and the City of Rockford Police Department. As we try to get back to some normalcy from that, we are going to continue with our Rockford reading. I didn't do I didn't do a live or any reading yesterday. These nights starting to get cold again, so I was a little bit under the weather. But it's all good. We back. Small things to a giant. We are on page. Hold on, 1 second. Oh, there we go. Okay, we are on page 228. Page 228. Actually, I think we're on page 229. Yeah, we on page 229. Excuse me. Now we are reading "In Defense of Looting" by Vicky Osterwile. For anybody who has never watched one of the Rockford reading segments, what we do is we read through a piece of literature and we cross-reference as we're reading through the piece of literature how the issues in the literature correlate to the issues that we're facing in the struggle to end police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in Winnebago County. So I'm not going to do too much of a review on what this book has been about because I did that just recently when we started the chapter. We're in the middle of the chapter, so it's pretty easy to catch up on. Good morning. Oh, man, somebody just told me I shouldn't say good morning. Somebody just told me not to say good morning, that I should say, no, I'm not finna go into it. But all right, okay, let's go. But while these media narratives fail to contain the anger of rioters, neither do they sufficiently explain it. At the time, the nature of the uprising was such that even Newsweek reported that, quote, what happened was not a race riot, but a class riot, end quote. Black people were not the only ones rioting. One of the most revolutionary aspects of the LA Rebellion was that the pattern that took a decade to unfold in the civil rights era, black people rising up and in turn encouraging the rest of the working class to insurrection, happened instantaneously. Quote, the rebellion started among black people, spread immediately to involve Latinos in South Central, which is about 42% Latino, and Pico Union, and then brought in unemployed white workers from Hollywood in the north to Long Beach in the south and Venice in the west, end quote. And the rebellion spread quickly to other cities. Looting, rioting, fighting with the police, arson, and massive infrastructural shutdowns popped off in San Francisco, the East Bay, San Diego, San Jose, Tampa Bay, Las Vegas, Seattle, Rochester, and Atlanta, and quote, there were smaller riots in Riverside, California, Denver, Miami, and Peoria, and Springfield, Illinois. Riots broke out in various locations in Maryland, New York, Ohio, Tennessee, Texas, and Alabama, end quote. Over $1 billion in damages was done, and 63 people died, the vast majority of whom perished at the hands of the 14,000 police, FBI, Drug Enforcement Administration, National Guard, federal marshals, Border Patrol agents, Army service members, and Marines deployed on May 2nd to put down the riots. More than 11,000 arrests were made, and a conservative estimate has 150,000 people participating in the uprising. So on that note, I want to point out that well, first let me point out that this is speaking about the LA riots that took place, the LA uprising that took place in '92. I would like to point out that we have had similar uprisings to the ones in LA in this recently in the uprisings that took place last year around the murder of George Floyd, and then some of the uprisings that took place in Ferguson after the murder of Michael Brown. And one of the things that we have noticed is that these uprisings are no longer contained to just the one city in which the act of police terrorism takes place in, or the act of racial injustice takes place in. You can see the domino effects of how, especially now with the internet and social media, how when one city rises up about a certain issue and comes out into the streets, other cities follow that lead and pour out as well. And Malcolm X said as much in 63, I believe it's 62 or 63. He was having an interview and he was saying how it'll be a time where you won't be able to contain these protests. He wasn't using the word protest. You won't be able to contain these riots and these uprisings to just the city that they take place in, that when they would happen, that you would see a trickle effect of them happening all over the world. And that's one of the things that we've seen happen here is that we've seen, May 30th took place after George Floyd was murdered in Minneapolis, and and you've seen the domino effect of all of these other cities and all of these, again, globally, all of these other places that where people feel the same type of oppressions that we feel here, and the same type of exploitations and the same type of marginalization. And even though it manifests itself differently, the feeling is still the same, the emotion is still the same, and so I think that that is one of the things that we have to also understand here as we're going through all of these things in Rockford, that there is cities all over this nation that are going through similar struggles and similar things, and a lot of times it's just about holding on to get to the point of Minneapolis where the levees break, or Ferguson where the levees break, and you can expose what it is that generations and decades of people in an area have been dealing with. And so I just think that I just wanted to point that out as we read through there. So let's continue. The main aspect the rioting took was looting and arson, direct expropriation of wealth and attacks on property. Unlike in Detroit in 1968, there was little sniping at police, though rioters were definitely armed. As journalist Mike Davis recorded at the time, quote, "The gangs have refrained from the deadly guerrilla warfare that they are so formidably equipped to conduct," end quote. As with every uprising, while often gang-affiliated youth performed most of the combat, the looting crowd was diverse. Quote, "Men and women, black and white, young and old. People have brought their children out here," end quote, one gobsmacked TV journalist reported. A rioter interviewed on live TV said, quote, "Look around you. These people are not thugs and gang members. These are women, children, babies, people that live in this community who are tired of the constant oppression, the constant abuse that they have been served," end quote. Reporters quickly turned to another interview. Whereas the uprising generalized across the working class, the riots were led by a new group of the urban poor. Members of a new underclass of the near permanently unemployed, cut adrift by the Reagan-driven destruction of social services and the collapse of manufacturing jobs, existing largely outside of the circus of production and consumption. This class lives at the very margins of the rising. The LA court bureaucracy was referring to cases around impoverished black males as, quote, NHI, end quote, quote, no humans involved, end quote. As Sylvia Winter writes, Rodney King was a member of these new black masses who, in distinction to the black middle class that had grown since the 60s, quote, have come to occupy a doubled pariah status, no longer that of only being black, but of also belonging to the rapidly accelerating post-industrial category of the poor and jobless, end quote. Here, and I want to point something out too. It's one of the, and you've seen this happening recently because of the one of the things that's happened around the COVID-19, but as they're pointing out here, there's almost this disdain in this country or in this society of somebody not making money or not making money, but not being employed in a manner in which another person deems to be respectable, or even besides that point, anything that is there's people who are pushed out of the margins of society. There are communities and groups of people who are picked last when it comes to jobs and fired first when it comes to jobs. There are groups of people in this community or in this world, groups of communities in this country, I should say, who are given the worst jobs, who are purposefully miseducated and go through the public school system to be workers. They breed workers in this society. But in the midst of breeding workers, they also breed people to fill in jails and to, a whole litany list of things. But my point of what I'm trying to say is that One of the things that has happened as we've watched through time and as we've continued to read through this book is we see that there are people who have systematically, besides just being black, being poor or being miseducated or being in some of these more impoverished communities, they have become exploited. It's spread out from further than just being black, which is how, again, when we talk about token integrationism, they allow a set of black people to come in with the understanding that bringing in those black people mean they have to find a new way to shift the oppression or exploitation. I'm not gonna lie, I just smoked this blunt, and so I low key, I'm not getting some of these points. I'm not making the right way. It always take like 3 pages to hop back in to get to the groove of doing this. All right. So I had a point I was trying to make. I didn't get to it. So we just gonna ignore all of that. All right, let's go back to the book. Okay. Many black radicals in the 60s foresaw this economic and social process of double dehumanization. Radical movement journals such as Soul Book, The Movement, The Crusader, and Inner City Voice, to name only a few, wrote consistently of the danger of coming automation and black isolation and alienation. Recognition of this class transformation is what prompted the Black Panther Party to organize the people Marxists had traditionally denigrated as the innately reactionary, quote, lumpen proletariat, end quote. The LA riots were the first uprising in the United States of this new post-industrial underclass, which Marxist theorists have referred to as, quote, surplus populations, end quote. People outside the process of the production of value, people who aren't even needed to drive down wages like the usual mass of unemployed proletarians are. These people whom capitalism regards as surplus do not and cannot make demands of a traditional industrial workplace, so their movements are invisible or opaque to many so-called revolutionaries who believe revolution can only emerge from a shop floor. And this disregard is furthered by the fact that the form of organization favored by this new population of declassed poor is not the union, but the criminal gang. In the weeks before the riot started, 2 warring sets within the Crips and a major crew of the Bloods negotiated a truce. The truce was finalized at a peace summit at the Imperial Courts Project Gym in Watts the day before the riots began, ending a gang war that had gone on for 2 decades in which hundreds of people were killed. They called the truce to build capacity to fight their real enemies, the police. This truce was a significant factor in the growth of the uprising, as the gang's high level of organization and pseudo-military training would come in handy in battling the police and opening up new areas of rebellion. As the fires burned, most of the other gangs in LA declared peace as well. 1 second. They got an asterisk, so let's read the excerpt for the asterisk. As is one of the core arguments of this book, such a clean distinction between class and race is untenably problematic. But this does show that the strategy of explaining everything solely through a non-class, non-intersectional, white, black racial lens has failed. I think that might be from a different asterisk. Yeah, I don't know. All right, 1 second. Damn, it's crazy. Oh, it is. That was from a different asterisk. Okay, this the right asterisk. Ryan Gaddy's All Involved, a widely renowned 2015 novel that frames the LA rebellion as a moment of total lawlessness in which gang members settle scores and murder people indiscriminately, consistently implying that the only thing keeping gangsters from going on killing sprees is the presence of the police, is a horrific inversion of these facts and gets the meaning and effect of the riots on it. Damn, that's crazy. Oh, let me leave the comments. Wait a minute. Okay. That's like a spam comment or something. It's like a spam bot. How spam bot get on here? All right, I got rid of the spam thing. That's crazy. Fuck Mark Zuckerberg doing? He need to take care of the spam bots. All right. He got time to fucking ban me for 30 days for some bullshit. Me got these spam bots out here running all wild and shit. All right, man. She must have had some kind of bone to pick with this Ryan Gaddis dude, because I ain't never heard of this all-involved book. All right, let's keep on reading. As Gerald Horne traces in his history of the Watts Uprising, Fire This Time, 3 major organizational trends emerged in the wake of Watts: the revolutionary activism of the Black Panther Party and other black radicals, quote, cultural, end quote, black nationalism, and criminal gangs. As COINTELPRO ruthlessly destroyed the revolutionary groups of the 60s and 70s, they left cultural nationalism like the Nation of Islam and gangs as the only forms of organization in the ghetto. To describe gangs as one dominant form of working class organization is not to romanticize them. By bringing the international drug trade through their communities, they managed to produce money and employment for their, quote, surplus populations, end quote, at the expense of dramatic social damage in the form of addiction and violence. Deeply hierarchical, built on sometimes almost cult-like devotion, and focused indelibly on obtaining money, these are most certainly not revolutionary organizations, though you could also describe many trade unions the same way. Another similarity the gangs have to unions is that, as a form of working class organization with clear leaders and a cohesive disciplinary apparatus, the state will, in moments of rebellion and upheaval, turn to them to negotiate concessions in return for an end to riots. To this end, the gangs in LA released a list of demands, most novel of which was the proposal that a gang member with a video camera should be assigned to every police patrol to keep them honest, but which also included more traditional demands about jobs, social centers, amnesty for rioters, and so forth. And then I think it's important for us to, again, this is why one of the things we want to be doing here is reading through these things and correlating them to things that we are facing currently, and not just arbitrarily taking the information. Again, I think this is something that is we've seen manifest itself recently in America as well. Last year there were you heard stories about different gangs and different sets that were having truce or calling truce or not focusing on inner turmoil inside the community as opposed to focusing on rising up against the people that occupy space in these communities. And I think that that's something that we have to be mindful of. We have to be understanding of that. That is another aspect of this struggle that will have to be waged, is that there are groups of people that are marginalized so far out of society that the streets or gangs or whatever, whatever. I don't want to. A legal organization, I guess a legal organization would be the best word to use. I think technically the May 30th Alliance is a legal organization. I don't think we in a legal organization, but I think that's how we categorized. But that they go to these places for refuge. They go to these places for belonging. They go to these places for purpose. And one of the things that can be found in this struggle is belonging and refuge and purpose. It's one of the things that I think many people who have been involved with this in this year and a half have found within it. I know that that's something that I've found within it. And so I think we have to do the job of articulating to these people, to these young people especially, who feel as if gangs are running the streets are the only ways to find some type of refuge or some type of purpose or some type of meaning in life. That it's a reason that they feel these ways. I think that that's one of the problems that one of the things that people don't give you in school, that you don't get from being institutionalized, is that a lot of the negative things that people go through growing up as children, and that you go through growing up as a teenager, that you go through existing in this society, they are not happenstance or coincidence or ironies. They are institutions which have found ways to profit. What's up? To profit off of you going through these things. They are individuals who have found ways to profit off of these things happening and to perpetuate these things happening. People who grow up with having their parents in and out of prison, people who grow up with having their homes raided by police, people who grow up with being miseducated, people who grow up in areas that they end up with physical ailments or genetic ailments that are passed down because of the environment in areas. These are all things that are, when you explain them to somebody and you explain that these things can be combated, you can instill that purpose, and you can still instill that refuge that they're looking for in the struggle against these things that made them need to seek refuge. And so I think that it's important that as we go through, especially because the issues that we're dealing with in police terrorism and mass incarceration specifically are things that if you want to end these things, you have to be comfortable with not just comfortable, but you have to become empathetic and understanding for somebody who this society may label as a criminal, or somebody that it would be considered a gang member. You have to, you can't push them out of the realm of understanding or out of the realm of empathy, because this issue directly affects these people. We have to get to America has made the word criminal synonymous with the word subhuman. Or the word gang member synonymous with the word subhuman. The same way they did with black, with the word black, and with black people, they just put it in writing specifically saying that they were 3/5 human. But the same thing is done for people who are considered felons. They're legally discriminated against. And so we can't advocate for, somebody will want to end world hunger, but they don't have no desire for, but they think felons shouldn't be able to live in public housing, or felons shouldn't be able to have a link card, or felons shouldn't be able to get money from the state to go to college. And these are all things that perpetuate police terrorism and perpetuate mass incarceration, because you continuously push people who are already on the outskirts of the society, on the margins of society, even further and further away from the society, and further into the margins. And so I just felt like I should try to touch on that some. The political role gangs play was even more pronounced in the 2015 Baltimore uprising. After street gangs and the Nation of Islam effectively teamed up to stop looting and repress rioting, media broadcast the spectacle of gang leaders sitting in on a city council meeting. They hadn't actually been welcomed into the official power structure of Baltimore, and they haven't achieved a lasting place in the council. But during an uprising, any group that proves itself able to repress and dampen resistance is temporarily given a seat at the table. Political parties, unions, gangs, nonprofits, and any other organizational forms that imagine their route to power goes through the state often stab uprisings in the back and even ally with the police if it seems to serve them. And again, that's something that you can see that they attempted to do here. This city, when RYA, Rockford Youth Abolitionists, the organization that was at the forefront of the struggle to end police terrorism, mass incarceration, and racial injustice in Winnebago County, when they organized the May 30th protest, and then organized multiple demonstrations after that, you've seen the city, along with a non-for-profit, or create another group and give it the same acronym as RYA. They was called Rockford Youth in Action, a group that no longer exists now. They picked two random people and put them together, but it was all done in an effort to try to co-opt what was going on here. It was all done in an effort to try to stab in the back what it is that people were, the movement that was being created here, that was being led by Rockford Youth Abolitionists and the activists and the organizers that were within Rockford Youth Abolitionists. And that is, what's up, brother? That is why and the same thing, this idea of sitting at the table, you'll always hear about how come they don't, May 30th Alliance won't sit at the table, or Leslie won't sit at the table if they won't take a seat at the table. And again, this lays out exactly where this idea of a seat at the table comes from. We don't need if it's some people who believe that the way that they can fix things personally is through trying to get a seat at the table, that is an ideology that I would 100% be able to 100% articulate against, but I understand that that is something that certain people will do. But for the people who are not doing that, it is not our responsibility or our job to be trying to get a seat at the table or get more of us seats at the table. It should be our responsibility and our job to change the table. Change the manner that the table exists in, because and change the things that are on the table instead of trying to continue to change the people who are sitting at the table. The problem is not simply the individuals at the table. The problem is the table. The table is the institution. The problem is the things that they have laid on the table and the end goal of the things that happen while sitting at that table. And again, it's not for the people who sit at that table are not there for the benefit of the masses. The people who sit at that table are there for the benefit of a few, and they disguise it as being there for the benefit of the masses. And so it's our responsibility, at least at the May 30th Alliance, what we are trying to do is to flip over the table, is to reconstruct the table. And then the people that sit in there, they can sit their asses right there. The same people can sit there. And if the nature of the table was flipped over and the nature of the table is changed, they will be forced to change the way that they act at the table and the way that they deal with things at the table. We have to change the status quo, and changing the status quo goes much further beyond trying to find a way to benefit off the status quo or trying to find a way to manipulate the status quo for profit. Despite propaganda to the contrary, gangs' existence in the ghetto is not only tolerated but also approved by the state, as they turn economic and social violence largely inward while giving the state an unlimited excuse for intervention and repression. Okay, and then there's the asterisk for this. This excuse, however, is just that. Gang violence is as much a myth the police use as an actual case of their action, and were it not for gangs, they would use something else. As we have seen, police violence in black neighborhoods is one of the few constants in American history. And gangs and the drug war are merely the most recent iteration of the ongoing explanation of that violence. And then I got to interject again. And then we've seen this happen even here in Rockford, Illinois, where the city, especially when you start talking to people who either are uninformed, purposefully or unintentionally uninformed about the difference between state-sanctioned violence and inter-community violence, or what would be called quote-unquote black-on-black violence. No matter what has existed in black communities, in poor communities, the police have always went in and inflicted violence. It has been a constant. Before gangs exist, before the street gangs that exist now existed, police was going into black neighborhoods and killing black people and assaulting black people and traumatizing black people. And much after what this iteration of street gangs or whatever exists, they will continue to do it if we don't change the consciousness of the society. So that is not the same thing as inter-community violence or quote unquote black on black violence. And the other thing that is even more primarily different is that the state profits off of this other violence, the black on black violence that is being spoken of, or the inter-community violence. The state profits just as much off of that as it does off of the state sanctioned violence. Gangs don't make no money off of the police inflicting violence in the community, but the police, the institution of policing, makes money off of gangs inflicting violence in communities, makes money off of drugs being pushed into communities. And historically, anybody who is informed about the country we live in understand that guns have been pushed into inner communities. Drugs have been pushed into inner communities purposefully. By federally, it's happened locally, and it's happened individually by individual police officers. So it's happened at every level, and it's happening right now. And so that is we have to be able to articulate that to people. Is quote unquote black on black violence an issue? Yes, but it's an effect. It's not a root issue. The police violence is a root issue. And it's a timeless root issue. It's existed for much longer than than the quote black on black violence that has existed. And so I just, I gotta interject there. All right. Damn, where we at? That's crazy. All All right. We see this in the widespread police practices of gang injunctions, gang databases, and mass arrest sweeps, the most famous of which was the 2016 Bronx 120, when NYPD arrested 120 black and Latinx youths in a series of massive raids. A huge number of arrestees were unaffiliated. Gang injunctions name certain blocks, street corners, or neighborhoods as, quote, hotbeds, end quote, of gang activity, allowing police to act with even more impunity in impoverished urban areas, banning public gathering, and prima facie criminalizing any young folks they want to harass on the street. Gang databases, meanwhile, are little more than lists of the poor urban youth who have had interactions with law enforcement, inventing gangs whole cloth to churn people more seamlessly into the prison industrial complex. Let me read through this and then I'll give a story. But in uprisings against the police, gang bangers frequently become frontline soldiers, doing the most dramatic and dangerous task in a riot. This danger, that peace between gangs could mean war on the pigs, became a reality during the LA Rebellion. And so then I want to point out this too when they talk about these gang databases. I just had somebody that was up here the other day that was talking to me. They from Chicago, and they was talking to me how they was arrested. The police arrested them one day when they was with their mom inside of a store. And they arrested them under some whatever the charge was, like suspicion of being involved in the gang or something like that. And when they it was some crazy ass charge. But when they arrested him, they said that he had on gang colors, and he said he had on red and black. I mean, he had on red and blue, and so they said that was gang colors. He said, and that's one of the things that is important to point out is that these are the type of tactics that the police use, where they'll pull you over or stop you for wearing gang colors, with the understanding that it's not no color that's not gang colors. And then his point even that he wanted to point out even further was that he was wearing blue and red, that those was conflicting gang colors. So if they would stop him for wearing, if he was truly wearing gang colors, those wouldn't even be the two colors that he was wearing. But again, the police and these institutions of policing, again, I'm not speaking about just any individual police. The institution of policing perpetuate this phone getting hot. Yeah, the sun perpetuate these things, and then they perpetuate them, and then they also act as pariahs off of them. They like exploit them, so they perpetuate. I don't want to be naming gangs and shit in this motherfucker. I'll be doing that too much anyways. All right, let's keep reading. And so, in the aftermath, the LAPD immediately focused on breaking the gang truce. They attacked and broke up inter-gang unity rallies, shut down, quote, truce barbecues, end quote, going on all summer, and infiltrated deep into the various gangs, working to instigate conflict. Nevertheless, the truce held, and the grassroots-led movement of gang de-escalation spread across the country, one of the main material victories of the riots. This led to an immediate, dramatic drop-off in gang violence in L.A. Homicides fell 44% in the first 2 years of the truce. Police, of course, took credit for this drop, all the while working to undermine the peace. Though the police couldn't dismantle the truce directly, they did in the intervening years manage to loosen and weaken gang organizational structure and discipline. And that's one of the things, again, let's interject. That's one of the things that has happened historically. The same way that America sends troops into foreign countries, and in the midst of trying to begin a coup, they'll kill the leader or imprison the leader or take the president or the prime minister or whoever is the person that's at the head of the government and get rid of them and kill them or assassinate them, whatever, some way to remove them. And then from that point, they know that people will then struggle for power, or the emotional response or the emotional turmoil that people within the government or people within that regime will go through will make it easier for them to infiltrate it and to topple it over. That's the same thing that they do and that they have done, that they did at the beginning of these gangs being created, and that they continue to do with the different sets in gangs. They'll arrest the person at the top or charge the person at the top with some felonious crime, something that they don't even have no proof of them doing, with the hopes of the gang toppling, or let the person get killed that's at the top, or kill the person themselves that's at the top, in the hopes of the fracturing of the gang or the fracturing of a set. And a lot of times that leads to more violence. as people fight for the top spot, or the same thing when they remove a drug dealer off the corner, or remove a section of people that's selling drugs in one area. What it does is it leads to instability, and then people fight and go to war over that area. This ain't done in the interest of protecting the community. It's done in the interest of boosting up their statistics. It's done in the interest of boosting up their arrest rate. It's done so they can have press conferences and parade the guns and the drugs all over and make it seem like they in Miami Vice. I don't know. I was trying to find something. I couldn't think of nothing quick enough. How many more pages I got left? I damn near gotta use the bathroom. I gotta drink. You drink more water trying to, cause your mouth get dry while you doing this, and that leads to you having to use the bathroom quicker. That was a side note. I could have kept that to myself. All right, let's keep reading. The police work romanticized in HBO's TV series The Wire, studying the ins and outs of gang politics, personalities, and hierarchies in order to arrest lieutenants and crush leaders, is a fantasy version of the process of disorganizing the gangs the police developed in LA after the riots that spread to police departments across the country. 25 years later, most gangs in the United States now are small, decentralized, highly localized groups of kids beefing over a few blocks, nothing like the massive, tightly organized, pseudo-paramilitary forces formed in the 70s and 80s. Meanwhile, that form of gang organization and violence grew in Latin America. These gangs were often direct products of U.S. government policy. The most famous example is in El Salvador, where hundreds of thousands of refugees fleeing the U.S.-backed, militarized, and funded 12-year civil war between left-wing guerrillas and the government crossed into the United States throughout the 80s. Living here in poverty and already once exiled by U.S. policy, many boys joined gangs as a way of staying safe in the streets of U.S. cities, only to be sent back to El Salvador under a Clinton-era scheme initiated in 1995, only 3 years after the end of the Civil War, that deported any immigrants convicted of gang felonies. So, boys, some of whom had no memory of El Salvador, and many of whom didn't even speak Spanish, were sent back to a, quote, home, end quote, country they had fled as children or even infants, places where they often had no or only distant family. They then reformed gangs based on those they participated in the States as a way of surviving their new, equally hostile environment. These gangs have since become massive, terribly violent, powerful actors. MS-13, one of the gangs transplanted directly from LA, has, in yet another turn of this self-reinforcing cycle, become a favorite racist boogeyman of the U.S. anti-immigrant right. And so again, I want to point out this sort of gets us to again understanding intersectionality, and so this shows you how these policies and these actions that were taken by the U.S. government had two effects. The effects that it had here, specifically on the black community that they're speaking about, and the destruction of the gangs that were being created here, and the decentralization of the gangs, and the arresting of the leaders, and the infiltrating of the gangs, and all of this forcing it to be less organized and less centralized, and then they were doing that. As they were doing that, and they were, funding drug wars in other areas. I'm not sure how many people have seen the TV show Snowfall. And again, that's a romanticized version of very real traumas for people. So I don't think that anybody should be watching Snowfall for history lessons. But it just does a good job of giving you a visual of the way that the U.S. government, and this is on documented history. This is not people's opinion. Well, Snowfall is not documented history, but the things that Snowfall is inspired by is documented history. The government was bringing in drugs. Government would be buying drugs in one country, bringing the drugs here for somebody to sell, getting the money that the drugs was being sold for, and going and buying guns, and then selling those guns to another country, and then just perpetuating this cycle. And this is all part of American imperialism. And this cycle that has been created through American imperialism has done great damage to the people of color in this country. And then because most of the world is comprised of people of color, it has also done great damage to the people of color in other countries and in outside countries. And a lot of those countries have immigrants that flee here, immigrants that have existed here, who have lived here and have second, third generation family members that are here. And so the strength of intersectionality, which is what I want to bring it back to, the strength of intersectionality is in understanding how myself and somebody who is second generation Salvadorian have both been oppressed and exploited by Americanism and by oppression, exploited by oppression. But how we have both dealt with those oppressions, and then finding ways in which we can articulate to people who, if for them may be Salvadorian and for me may be black, how we do have this intersectionality and how it is more strengthened us understanding not only our similarities and to strengthen our similarities, but also understanding our differences and to strengthen our differences. And so I just think that that's big ass B. An important thing to point out here. And we got like 5 pages left in this chapter, but I'm going to tell you now, we're not going to get through it because I got to go use the bathroom. But I'm going to try to knock out one more page. In other places, such as Colombia, Guatemala, Mexico, and Afghanistan, the enforcers of right-wing state structures put in place by or emerging after U.S. destabilization become drug warlords, cartels existing as basically sovereign powers, pseudo-states funded by the more or less infinite demand for drugs and immigrant laborers in the United States and Europe. The war on terror is merely a continuation into different theaters of tactics, strategies, and effects developed during the war on drugs, which was itself an extension of the war on black communities of resistance. Okay, that gets us to page 235. What's up, brother?
26, man.
Let me see.
I'm gonna leave my food right here, man.
For sure, you know you all good. Hold on.
How you treat this morning, man?
Yeah, keep it pushing. It ain't no other way to do it.
I already know how you get out.
Let me see. I think I got something in mind.
So all I need is 20 cents, man. Give me some good. Hello, ladies. Good morning. Good morning. I'm all good. And I'll be right back.
For sure.
I'm
gonna holler at you. Yep.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. All right, we're on the top of page 235. The 2000s were a terrible decade of social dissolution and oppression in the United States. The, quote, stability and prosperity, end quote, of the middle classes in the 90s were built on widespread increases in consumer debt, not increased wages. Quote, welfare reform, end quote, had doomed millions to deeper poverty. NAFTA and other globalization trends continue to smash unions and pull blue-collar jobs out of the country. And mass incarceration have been expanded and accelerated to all-time highs by tough on crime, quote, new Democrats, end quote. Movements fared badly too. The Alter Globalization movement, a bold, increasingly powerful and militant association of anarchists, labor radicals, and other activists that made world headlines by rioting to shut down the World Trade Organization in the 1999 Battle of Seattle, was utterly shattered in the reactionary aftermath of the September 11th terrorist attacks. In their wake, George W. Bush's administration swung the state in an even more deeply authoritarian direction, consolidating incredible powers in the White House, vastly expanding surveillance, implementing more border and police apparatuses, and starting a forever, quote, war on terror, end quote, in the Middle East. Massive anti-police riots in Cincinnati, Ohio in 2001, and smaller anti-Nazi rioting in Toledo, Ohio in 2005, could not stem the rightward swing and receive little attention nationally. The biggest show of organized resistance to Bush's regime, the 2003 protest against the Iraq War, which featured the largest single day of protest in world history, was simply shrugged off and failed to transition into an ongoing anti-war movement. And the immigrants' rights movement, appearing on the scene with the massive strike and day of action, the day without an immigrant on May 1st, 2006, thereafter strayed increasingly toward patriotic, respectability-focused, and the Democratic Party-centered reform strategies. I don't know why I keep drinking this water knowing I gotta pee. This bee is tripping. The nadir of the entire period came in 2005 when Hurricane Katrina hit the Gulf Coast. Katrina wreaked devastation across the South. 1,836 people died in the immediate flooding and chaos, and another few thousand died in the next 6 months from the conditions exacerbated or caused by the storm's destruction. And when the Mississippi River overflowed its banks, destroying the levees and flooding 80% of New Orleans, the anti-black character of the Bush administration became terribly clear. As the majority black city drowned, and the waters rose to 15 feet in many places, the federal government barely responded. A Canadian search and rescue team managed to get a support force to New Orleans faster than the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, did. When FEMA finally arrived, in many cases it actually slowed down rescue and evacuation procedures with bureaucratic power struggles, ridiculous paperwork, and general incompetence. Kanye West's statement at a televised fundraiser that, quote, George Bush doesn't care about black people, end quote, was as clear a fact as could be. It was an important generational moment, what Michael Denzel Smith refers to as, quote, rebirth of black rage, end quote, that was captured, shared, and disseminated widely by millennials using emerging internet technologies. But in those reactionary times, it was as far as the mainstream political conversation about anti-blackness was going to. The municipal government of New Orleans, which had declared a forced evacuation before the storm, was utterly unprepared for the disaster. The police didn't even have enough battery-powered radios to operate once the power went out, and local government totally collapsed. Those too poor, old, or sick to leave New Orleans were left alone, without food, route of escape, or safe haven in the midst of one of the largest natural disasters in U.S. history. Of the nearly 1,836 people who lost their lives, most of them were poor, black, and elderly. 7,000 prisoners, the vast majority black, and almost all arrested for minor crimes and misdemeanors, who were unlucky enough to be jailed at the time of the storm, experienced, as prisoners always do, some of the worst of government malevolence. They survived brutal beatings and pepper spraying by police and jailers, and the utter terror of near drowning as they watched the waters rise from within locked cells. Then many were seated outside in handcuffs in the hot sun for days, waiting for evacuation, only to spend the next year in prison, regardless of charges, as the governor suspended habeas corpus. Damn. Hey, what up? How you doing? You see somebody has tried to shoot at us? You seen that shit? That's hell no, they were shooting at us when the bullet hit the table. One of the bullets hit the ground, the skirt hit the table. You can still feel the mark on the table. Motherfuckers crazy. I think it was somebody worked for the police. I for real, it might be. Shit is crazy out here. I love you. Damn, that's crazy. He suspended habeas corpus. That's some sick ass shit. This was referred to locally as, quote, doing Katrina time. Wow. What the fuck? I did not know that should happen. Wow. Suspended habeas corpus. Doing Katrina time. Oh, that's some sick shit. All right, let's keep reading. Damn, that's sick. How many more pages we got left in this shit? We got 2 pages left. These books all be sick and be sick shit going on in these books. All right. But rather than focus on the tragedy or the governmental crimes, media, both local and national, summoned instead the image of the black looter. They reported sniping at helicopters, widespread arson, the killing of rescue workers, mass rape and murder in the Superdome, quote, thuggery, end quote, they called it. Almost all of these stories were false and had to be retracted. Studies have consistently shown that in the wake of natural disasters, people come together and help each other, and crime and violence drop dramatically, and Katrina was no different. But the retractions all came much too late. The enduring story of Katrina was of lawlessness, criminality, riot. White vigilantes and police officers, stewing in the paranoia and the summer heat, responded with murder and mayhem. Though the full extent of their crimes is unknown, much of the evidence appears to have gone carefully unrecorded by police or was destroyed by the coroner and other governmental offices. Oppressive actors, such as property owners, the state, and white supremacists, to, quote, restore, end quote, law and order through brutal violence. It is hard not to see in their violence, in the face of governmental collapse, the shadow of the violence of ex-Confederates in the chaotic early years of Reconstruction, and in particular, in the New Orleans riot in 1866, when police and other ex-Confederate whites massacred 44 black delegates to the Louisiana Constitutional Convention. Constructing a narrative of lawless Katrina survivors justified the horrifying actions of police and white residents. Police murdered families fleeing New Orleans, most infamously killing 2 and seriously wounding 4 unarmed refugees on the Danziger Bridge and murdering Dan Brumfield in front of the convention center, crimes for which cops were actually prosecuted, although only a decade later. When two black men went to a police outpost looking for an ambulance to take their friend Henry Glover, dying of a gunshot wound, to the hospital, police instead arrested and brutally beat the 2 men, left Glover to bleed to death in the back of the car, then drove the car to a levee and lit it on fire so as not to deal with his body. God. What the I ain't never heard this story. What the hell? These cases garnered a lot of media attention. I should just point out this too. I was a freshman when Katrina happened, so I was a kid when this happened, so I wasn't very hip to the news cycle. That's crazy though. I've never heard of this. What up, man? You stay on something different. These cases garnered a lot of media attention, and so prosecutors focused all their energy and resources on them. But similar crimes went pointedly uninvestigated. In white middle class Algiers Point, a militia formed, quote, to protect the neighborhood from looters and criminals, end quote, that in fact hunted black refugees. One vigilante, Wayne Janak, interviewed in a documentary made after the storm, described killing black survivors as follows. Quote, "It was great. It was like pheasant season in South Dakota. If it moved, you shot it," end quote. Another, Nathan Roper, says police gave them support and instruction to kill. Quote, "If they're breaking in your property, do what you got to do and leave them on the side of the road," end quote. The emergence of, quote, stand your ground, end quote, laws, the first of which came into being in October 2005 in Florida, another state badly damaged by Katrina, codified into state law these forms of white supremacist vigilante murder. And that would be that stand your ground law would be what would George Zimmerman, trifling ass, would get off on after lynching Trayvon Martin in Florida. And so, again, I just want to point out that one of the commonalities throughout this book has been the violence that is a specter over the existence of people of color in this society, and how that has shifted and has changed based on the times, which is why it is important that we focus on changing the consciousness and changing the thought pattern and changing the ideology, because we see how when you focus your full effort on trying to change policies or just trying to change laws or just trying to have different people be politicians or just on this false idea of inclusion, what happens is you get people in office who just continue the status quo. What happens is you get policies that do not reverse oppression or reverse exploitation, but just make oppression and exploitation look different and make it more digestible and make it be less offensive to people. And that's what the stand your ground law is. The stand your ground law is just a way for Jim Crow justice to be enacted. It's just a way for white people to be able to lynch and kill people of color in these southern states. That's all that it is. Man, get y'all ass out, Florida. I shouldn't say that. It's not that easy. It's just not that easy to move out of the place. I shouldn't say that. It's not that easy to just move out of somewhere. It's people who be here that are talking about, oh, just move out of Rockford. No, y'all should try to fix Florida. You should try to absolve Florida of its issues. You should struggle in Florida. Struggle for justice in Florida. That's what you should do. But God, oh my goodness, Florida is crazy. All right. Rockford crazy too, though. Motherfuckers was just shooting at us last week. Because these victims might have been, quote, looting, end quote, though they were almost certainly just trying to get to the evacuation point in Algiers, their deaths were disregarded, and the militiamen who proudly described their actions on video went unpunished. Journalist A.C. Thompson interviewed Tulane University historian Lance Hill, authors of The Deacons for Defense, cited extensively elsewhere in this book, about the situation. Quote, because of the widespread notion that blacks engaged in looting and thuggery as the disaster unfolded, Hill believes many white New Orleans approved of the vigilante action. By and large, I think the white mentality is that these people are exempt. I think that if any of those cases went to trial, and none of them have, I can't see a white person being convicted of any kind of crime against an African American during that period. End quote. The New Orleans PD intentionally kept very few records during the disaster, and the coroner also seems to have destroyed and covered up information about bodies that came through his office. We got a corrupt coroner out here ourselves. I was about to say something, but I ain't gonna say it. I'm getting better at learning when certain things to say and not to say, but I was gonna say something, but I ain't gonna say it. All right. I'm thinking it though. All right. Thus, quote, looting, end quote, real or imaginary, becomes an instant marker of the, quote, NHI, end quote, category described by Winter. No humans involved. From the New York City blackout to LA to Katrina, looting became the prototypical crime of the black, poor, and surplus, an act that immediately exiled its perpetrators from the human community and sentenced them to death, an action that proved the righteousness of their disposability. It's no wonder, after such violent categorization, that people and movements today want to disavow looting or distance, quote, real protesters, end quote, from looters. But we must not reproduce that mark of no humans involved on our comrades, our siblings in the struggle. Instead, we must join them to overthrow the world that would see anyone so marked. And that ends the last chapter of In Defense of Looting. I think that was a very poignant point to end it on. But we have a conclusion. So we still got, it's like at the end of the Marvel movies when they got like a little clip at the end still. So we still got a little scene at the end credits. However, I got to go use the bathroom real quick. This looks like it's about 9 pages long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this live, go use the bathroom, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to read through these 7 pages. Now, I want to say this. It's a lot of times where I say I'm going to come back and finish reading, and I don't do it. But I do got to go use the bathroom. I do. All right. Damn. I'm going to be right back. So I'm not going to do I'm not going to do our outro, and that's going to take too much time. I got to use the bathroom. All right. We outside.